Good evening, my friends. Welcome to Outlandish Talmud Stories and Outstanding Life Lessons, Part 27. Tonight's class is titled, 4 Rabbis Walk into Heaven, and they're in for a big surprise. Sounds like some kind of joke, but it's far from a joke. It's a very important, very mysterious, very interesting story in the Talmud. I want to thank tonight's the generous people who have dedicated tonight's class. I want to thank John and Susan Kogan, who have dedicated tonight's class in honor of John's birthday. Mazal Tov, God should bless you. Shnat Hatzlacha, happy, successful, healthy New Year together with your beautiful family. Only good blessings for you all. I also want to thank Benny Sterenthal for dedicating tonight's class in honor of the upcoming yahrzeit of his father, Shlomo ben Natan. And may his neshama have an aliyah and be a great zchut, great merit for your family and for us all. May we only celebrate simchas together. I want to thank everybody who's been dedicating our classes, and if you would like to dedicate a class and help us continue doing what we do, there's a link in the video description. Click on that, dedicate one class, dedicate a whole month of classes. Whatever you're able to helps us a lot. The source sheet for tonight's class is in the video description as well. Tonight we're studying a story from the Talmud. It's in Tractate Chagiga, page 14. It goes over a few pages, 14, 15, 16, and I've just taken out a few of the paragraphs from those pages. Those pages in the Talmud, in Chagiga, are filled with mystical discussions and conversations. And it's very, very intriguing and very esoteric. And tonight we're going to be doing one of those stories. The story tonight is actually brought down in several sources. I apologize, Benny. It's Natan ben Shlomo. Thank you for correcting me. The yahrzeit of Natan ben Shlomo, may his neshama have an aliyah. Thank you. So tonight's story actually is brought down in several sources. We have one source in the Talmud we're going to be studying. It's also brought down in the Zohar. It's also brought down in a Medrash and in other places. And each time it's brought down, it's with some different details, nuances, information. We're going to mainly focus on the version of the Talmud, even though we may make reference to some of the other versions as well. The Zohar has a fascinating rendition of this story with a very deep, mystical, profoundly psychological interpretation, which we're not going to really touch on tonight. That's very heavy, and I need to work more on it in order to be able to prepare it. And as we'll see, one of the trappings of this story is getting caught up in things that we don't fully understand, and that's not so beneficial or healthy for us. So I don't want to go there for you tonight. I want to try to make things clear and understandable and palpable. So we're going to stick to some of the other commentaries on the story. So, you know, everyone wants to know more. We want to know the real secrets. We want to know why. We want to know the reason, the background behind everything. If we were given an opportunity to go up and to see what's going on the other side, you know, hello from the other side. Today they're buying tickets, flights to travel to the moon, to travel to space. Fine, that's actually a big curiosity of mine, and I'm not sure that I'm going to actually do it, but we always want to know more what's out there. But today we're going to be discussing about what about if I want to know not just what's out there within our world, but I want to know what's out there outside of our world. I want to know what's really going on from the bird's eye view. I want to know what's going on from the side of the Creator, the other side of the curtain behind me. What's really the driving forces behind what's happening in my life and the world around me? This is a mystery. This is a curiosity that mankind has always had. And tonight we're going to learn about 4 people who tried to figure it out, tried to go and see it for themselves, and didn't necessarily come back with the best results. Okay, so I hope you have your source sheet. You know, one of the very famous, beautiful verses of the Torah, which instructs us how to live our life. The Torah says, Tamim tihiyeh im Hashem Elokecha. You should walk and live with your God in a state of tamim. Tamim means to be simple, to be unassuming, to just accept things as they are, embrace the life that God has given you with the skill set, with the knowledge that God has blessed you with, and use your own faculties, use your own potential to live the life the best you can. That's what it means to be tamim. But we don't like to be tamim. We like to go deeper and know more. What is it that we're not being told? How do we find out the back end of the story? Some people go to fortune tellers and to people who read their palms and read their faces and read their stars and read their horoscopes because they want to know other information out there that's not easily accessible to them. But the Torah says, no, that's not your business. If it's not being told to you, if it's not being communicated to you, if it's not being shown to you, then you don't have to know that. You have to be tamim. But there is this thirst that we have. So can we satiate it? How can we satiate it? What more is there to know? Can we ever get there in a safe way, in a way that only enhances our life and our mission, and not in a way that can, heaven forbid, harm us? So that's going to be the theme of tonight's story. Hope you have the source sheet in front of you. Story on Chagiga, page 14. Let's begin. The sages taught. There were 4 sages who entered the Pardes. What's a Pardes? A Pardes here you have in English, it means an orchard. Now, it doesn't mean they entered into a beautiful orchard field, but the Pardes is a metaphor for, what does Pardes sound like? Pardes is the Hebrew, you have it in Latin also, and it eventually came into an English word called paradise. Paradise, Pardes. So we refer to paradise, not just on the islands living up on the white powder sand, but paradise in heaven, paradise in the world that's a higher spiritual world other than ours. So the Pardes refers to Gan Eden, the higher world, the other side of the story, where the spiritual vantage point of everything going on in this world. That is the Pardes. There isn't a lot of talk about this in our literature. I mean, in Kabbalah, in the Kabbalistic, esoteric, mystical wisdoms, there's a lot of discussion about this, and we're going to get to this tonight. And you do have a couple works that are gathered, that are collections of teachings about sages. They're called Heichalot. You have the Heichalot Rabbati, the long version, the big version, Heichalot Zutrasi, the short version. And the Heichalot, we don't have all of them remaining still today, but they are a collection of teachings that do delve into the other side, and it's not so commonly studied by a lot of people, rightfully so, because it's hard for us to understand. But this is what these 4 rabbis attempt to do. What were they trying to do? What happened to them? Let's try to find out. Who were the 4 rabbis of the Talmud? List who they are. They were, number 1, Ben Azai. Number 2, Ben Zoma. Number 3, Acher. And number 4, Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva, I'm sure everyone's heard of. This is at a time we're talking about here around the 2nd century after the Common Era. After the destruction of the temple. Also after the revolt of Ben Bar Kokhba. So if you're familiar with the story, several decades after the destruction of the temple, but the Jews still wanted to get back at the Romans and remain a stronghold on Jerusalem, thinking they could fight back the Romans. And so there was one star, one legend, one great general, Bar Kokhba. He was a fierce warrior, and the Talmud talks about how he gathered his soldiers in a very severe way. He made them cut off their fingers to show their brute strength and their courage, or to uproot trees. He had an unbelievable army. And he was also a very holy person. He was a righteous person. So much so that Rabbi Akiva thought he might be the Mashiach. He believed he's going to fight the final wars that are going to destroy the Romans, and they'll be able to take hold of Jerusalem once again and rebuild it and bring Mashiach, bring the ultimate redemption. That didn't end so well. Bar Kokhba didn't survive that war. And even though he may have been Mashiach or a potential Mashiach, but it didn't end up being Mashiach. And think about the mood, the state of the people after the destruction of the temple, the murder of millions of Jews, the exile of the Jewish people, and now the downfall of their last hope, Bar Kokhba and his army. The mood and the environment was not a pleasant one, and there was a lot of hope that was being lost. And so everyone is searching for answers. During a time of crisis, during a time of great tragedy, we want answers. What's going on? Why is this happening? What should we be doing with this thing? Will there be a better time? Will we repair and recover from this? These are the big questions that we ask. So it seems that This may have been on the mind of these great rabbis who entered into the Pardes. So Rabbi Akiva, then we have Ben Azai and Ben Zoma, two strange names, son of Azai, son of Zoma. We don't know, we're not being told what their names are, just who their father's names are. So their names were actually Shimon. Shimon the son of Azai and Shimon the son of Zoma. However, they're referred to most of the time in the Talmud as just the son of Azai and Zoma. They're also not even referred to as rabbi. They're just called by their names. So apparently they may have never received smicha. They never received the formal rabbinic ordination to receive the title of rabbi. And they also didn't even get the honor or the credit to be referred to by their first name, which is strange. They were very great people. We're going to learn a little bit about them. But maybe what happens in tonight's story, we'll see why they're not referred to with their first name. The fourth rabbi is referred to here with a very strange name, Acher. Acher means the other one. Acher means the outcast. Why would we call a great rabbi an outcast? You shouldn't call your child that, your friend that. Why would we call him the great rabbi that? So you who have the text in front of you, you see what's written in the non-bulb, which is not brought down in the Talmud, it's the commentary, so you know who it is. It's Elisha ben Avuya. But Elisha ben Avuya is called Acher. He's not referred to, very rarely is he referred to by his own name. The rabbi is called Acher. Why such a derogatory name about him? So if you study tonight's story, you'll figure out exactly why, and there are other stories about him as well. The truth is, there's room to do a class on each one of these people. Rabbi Akiva would discuss the great length, but the others need a more lengthy discussion to discuss them in their own rights and their lifestyle and their accomplishments, their failures or whatever, and we'll actually get a chance to do a class on each of them. But for now, we're doing the story of these four great rabbis. Now, they all entered into the Pardes, they entered into heaven. What does that mean? How do you get to heaven? Which flight do you take? What do you drink? What do you smoke to get into heaven? Not just coffee. L'chaim. So it's important to understand what it means to go into heaven, because we have several episodes throughout history of rabbis who have entered into heaven. If you recall, there's a story on Yom Kippur. On Yom Kippur, when the Roman emperor decreed brutal death, torturous death to many of the great rabbis, so they turned to Rabbi Yishmael, the high priest, and they wanted to know, could this really be true? Does God want us to be killed this way? Could you find out from God? So that we read the story of Yom Kippur, and what happened was Rabbi Yishmael went to heaven. And in heaven, he discussed this with God or with the angels, and he found out, yes, this was the decree. What does that mean? Where did he go? Did he disappear and then come back? And there's many other stories in the Talmud of people who have gone to heaven. More recently, there's a very famous letter of the Baal Femtov. The Baal Femtov wrote a letter to his brother-in-law, Reb Gershon Kittever, and he describes to him, I once went into heaven, and I went to the Heichal HaMashiach, I went to the chamber of Mashiach, and I asked him the big question, Emasai Kasimar, when are you coming? We're all waiting for you. And he answered, when your teachings, your Torah, your well springs will be spread out around the entire world, which is what became a movement of spreading a teaching, Hasidic teachings throughout the whole world. Doesn't matter all the different stories, but the question is, what does it mean to go and to enter into heaven? So we have two commentaries here from Rashi, from Tosfos, from others, and they say as follows. First of all, they didn't go anywhere physically. Their body stayed here. When you go to, where is heaven? Right? Heaven is not talking about the sky. The sky is up there, earth is down here, but heaven is a spiritual reality. It's a spiritual domain. So if you ask the question, where is it? It's almost like a faulty question, because saying where is something, you're implying place A, place B within a physical realm. Heaven, meaning a spiritual realm, has no space. You can't ask the question, which space is it in? Heaven is here. The spiritual reality is right in front of our eyes. It's all over. It's different depths, different layers within the reality that we see. If we're not seeing heaven, it's because we're not on the level to perceive heaven. And if you want to travel to heaven, then you have to become on the level where you can start to see things differently, see things deeper. I'll give you an example. Imagine you have an architect, a friend, and you and that architect's friend are walking along the streets of Chicago, renowned for its architecture. And you're walking around, you're a simple lay person, and you got your camera in front of you, and you're taking nice pictures, you're a tourist, you know, a nice building, a nice tree, a nice park, etc. And that's what you're seeing. The architect is not seeing anything of what you're seeing. The architect is looking at each building and seeing something else completely different. He's seeing how much the design of the building, the engineering of the building, how much steel was used, how much concrete was used, the different angles, and he's doing math and engineering and computing all the data and figuring out how they construct it. He seeing, so you're not having the same conversation with each other. You're admiring the color and the height, and he's admiring the engineering beauty behind this building. So you're both looking at the same building but not seeing the same thing. Why? Because you're two different people, and you live by two different realities because of your life expertise, your knowledge, or your profession. So similarly, you can be a regular person who sees things with your fleshy eyes, and you see your clothing, the table, the screen in front of me, the coffee. You see things at face value. Or if you're a more spiritually sensitive person, or if you know how to use spiritual techniques, you're able to transcend. You're able to go elevate and to see and perceive reality from a greater depth. Going to heaven, therefore, is possible for anybody if you know how to do it and if you're on that level. These rabbis, how did they get to heaven? So Tosfos says that they used Shem Hashem. They used spiritual incantations of God's name and mystical formulas. That's one thing. And they also used probably some kind of deep meditational technique, able to isolate themselves and their soul and their spiritual vision away from the exterior, the hustle bustle, the distracting world around them, and they were able to, through using God's name, Kabbalistic techniques, and intense meditation, were able to enter into the domain of heaven. Now, just to make sure that you don't try this at home, this is something often we refer to as called Kabbalah Ma'asit. Kabbalah, there's different kinds of Kabbalah. The mystical tradition. There's the limud, the study of Kabbalah, and then there's the practice of Kabbalah. The practice of Kabbalah is something which is an art that is not really known much today, or if it is known by some, we have been cautioned not to use it, but it's using spiritual formulas and all kinds of spiritual techniques to manipulate creation, to alter creation, to transcend and to enter into all kinds of unnatural states. Not a healthy thing for most of us to do, maybe for some people. But the Arizal, in fact, cautioned his student, Rabbi Chaim Vital, this is going back to the 16th century, and he told him not to practice this practice of Kabbalah, not to use God's names to come up with all kinds of manipulations of reality. Because in order to do that, you have to be in a great state of purity. And nobody today, or almost nobody, is in that state of purity. The Arizal said, ever since the destruction of the temple, and ever since the ash of the para aduma, of the red heifer, that ash was used to purify people who had become in contact with a dead body. That ash ran out somewhere within the first few centuries after the temple was destroyed. And so starting from the times of the Amoraim, which is around the 5th, 6th century, it wasn't in use anymore. Ever since that time, nobody is able to become completely spiritually purified, which is one of the things that when Mashiach will come, we'll find the 10th red cow, and then we'll be able to create that ash and purify ourselves. But until then, everybody's in this kind of state of spiritual impurity and is unworthy of entering heaven or experiencing these spiritual, mystical experiences. Now, I'm not going to say everybody, because there are some people throughout recent history who have done this and are probably deserving and worthy of doing this. But for you and I, don't try this at home. All right. So as they're making their way, this is a group kind of experience. They're all, the four of them are transcending together into this zone of heaven. As they're entering, Rabbi Akiva turns to them and he says, when upon your arrival in the upper worlds, you reach pure marble stones, do not say, water, water, even if it appears to be water. Because it is stated, he who speaks falsehood should not be established before my eyes. What's going on over here? Is there water in heaven? Heaven is not a physical place. It's not in the water in the clouds and the sky. In heaven, in the spiritual domain, there's nothing physical. There's no water. There's no stones. What are these stones they're going to see? Why the temptation for water? Don't say water, water. It's a lie. What's happening over here? So the commentaries explain that the stones we're talking about over here are pure, gorgeous sapphire stones, brilliantly transparent, pure stones. If you recall, you may know that when King Herod renovated the Second Temple, he built the walls, one of the walls, out of this gorgeous, pure, brilliant sapphire stone. So it's all this shades of blue. And where the Talmud says that when he looked at that wall, it looked like you were looking at the ocean and at waves, and almost like the waves were moving. And I'm not sure if anything has been recreated like this ever since, but it sounds like it's something absolutely dazzling and gorgeous. Rabbi Akiva says there are these blue sapphire stones that are around the perimeter of heaven where you're attending. And it may look like water. It may look like waves. Really, there's no water there at all. So don't shout water, water, because that's a lie. That's not a truth. There's no water in heaven. And therefore be very, very careful. What's he cautioning? What's the danger here? We don't understand. Hopefully, eventually, we will tonight. Now, they entered into heaven. Well, what happened to them? Sad story. Ben Azai glimpsed at the divine presence and died. He expired. And with regard to him, the verse states in Tehillim and Psalms, precious in the eyes of the Lord is the death of his pious ones. Yakar b'nei Hashem. We sing this in the Hallel. Yakar b'nei Hashem. Hamav salah hasidav. Ben Azai was considered Chasidav, one of God's pious ones, and God was deeply upset that he died. He died very young. He was a young man over here. There was a whole life of unfulfilled potential. Ben Azai is somebody that the Talmud says when he passed away, that was the last of the diligent Torah students to ever live on this world. Ben Azai was somebody that when he studied Torah, it says there was a fire surrounding him that nobody could come close to him. Ben Azai was a tremendous, tremendous scholar and saint. And when he passed away from that experience of glimpsing into the divine, God got very, very sad for him. Why did he die? Let's see. Next, Ben Zoma. Ben Zoma, what happened to him? He also glimpsed at the divine presence and he was harmed. Meaning, he became mentally unstable. Sounds like he had some kind of mental breakdown. And he never healed. He lived the rest of his life mentally unstable, mentally ill. And with regard to him, the verse states, have you found honey? Eat as much as is sufficient for you, lest you become full from it and vomit it. If you eat too much, it's not going to be good for you. Ben Zoma was trying to achieve too much. And in the end, it struck him in a very harmful way, and he became mentally ill. Next, Acher. What happened to Acher? He chopped down the shoots of the saplings. He cut down the trees, it said. In other words, this means he became a heretic. He returned as an apostate. He left the Jewish faith. He left God. He was an unbelievable Torah scholar, a great teacher in the Talmud. There's some sages like Rabbi Meir who learned all of the Torah from him, and yet he just left the faith, gave up on God, gave up on his tradition and his religion. He became an apostate, which is why he brought such a difficult experience for the community to handle. Imagine the greatest rabbi just leaves the community, leaves the Jewish faith. And he brought a desecration to God's name, to the Torah. So he's referred to as Acher. We don't want to even talk about his name anymore. Let's not talk about him. He's the other one, the outsider, the outcast. Finally, Rabbi Akiva, he came out safely. In fact, the Gemara says, Rabbi Akiva ascended in safety and descended safely. Or in the Hebrew, Allah b'shalom, when he went up, when he went into heaven, it was b'shalom, it was with peace. Here the English is safety, but the Hebrew was b'shalom, in peace. I didn't translate this over here. He went up in peace, v'yatza b'shalom, and he came out peacefully as well. He came out unscathed, in one piece, healthy and well from the whole experience. With regards to him, the verse from the Song of Songs, Shir HaShirim, says, draw me, we will run after you, the king has brought me into his chambers. Rabbi Akiva seems to have entered heaven in a responsible way, in a way that was drawn after God, guided responsibly by God. God brought him into the chambers. He did whatever he needed to do there, and he was able to leave without getting harmed. The Gemara relates, side 2. Even though he came out unharmed, it wasn't so simple. He almost got harmed. He had a very daring situation. Even Rabbi Akiva, the ministering angels sought to push him out of the orchard. When he came into heaven, the angels had no tolerance for this human being coming into their domain. You don't belong here. They wanted to push him out and harm him. The Holy One, blessed be he, said to them, leave this elder, for he is fit to serve my glory. He's an old man. Don't touch him. But more than that, he's actually worthy of being here. Leave him alone. What did Rabbi Akiva do differently than everyone else? Everyone else went there to glimpse into God, to see the other side of the story, peek behind the curtain, and they all got harmed. And Rabbi Akiva, nothing happened to him. So the Gemara asks, what verse did Rabbi Akiva expound that prevented him from making the same mistake as Acher? How did he... With what did he fortify himself? So first of all, we already know at the beginning of the story, Rabbi Akiva did caution them about a particular thing. He said, when you see the blue marble stones, the sapphire stones, and he attempted to say water, water, don't say water, water. It's a lie. Whatever that means, that was already one safeguard that Rabbi Akiva had. And now the Gemara also says, there's actually a number of opinions, but Rabbi Chia, the son of Abba, said that in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, that Rabbi Akiva understood or contemplated the following verse from the book of Kings. The verse says, but the Lord was not in the wind, and after the wind, an earthquake. The Lord was not in the earthquake, and after the earthquake, fire. But the Lord was not in the fire, and after the fire, a still small voice. And it states in that verse, and behold, the Lord passed by. Elijah the prophet, Eliyahu Navi, wants to know where is God. He's trying to find God, and he thinks God is in the big experiences of the fires and the earthquakes and the winds and the storms. But each one of them happen, and he doesn't discover God over there. And finally, he realizes that God is in the small, still, quiet voice. And if you look in those quiet places, unassuming places, you will find the truth and God over there. And that's how the Gemara concludes. Okay. We need to unpack this story. It is a very outlandish story, but there are some outstanding lessons over here. What's going on over here? What did Rabbi Akiva tell them? Why does Ben Azai die? Ben Zoma go Meshuggah? Acher becomes an apostate? What were they trying to do there? And what did they see? And how did they get harmed? And then they came back. And then Rabbi Akiva is the only one that came back peacefully. There's a famous discussion about the idea of studying Kabbalah. When should a person study Kabbalah, if ever? And you may have known, we've spoken about this a couple of months ago. There's this idea until the age of 40, you should start studying Kabbalah. Some people say there's no source for that. You can study Kabbalah even younger than 40. But there is a very clear teaching from the Talmud and taught by Maimonides, by the Rambam as well. And he says, before you delve into Kabbalah, before you delve into the esoteric, ancient, mystical wisdoms and teaching of Judaism, first you have to fill your stomach, fill your mind and heart with the regular, more mundane content of the Torah. He calls it the bread and the meat of Torah. Once you've become balanced and filled with the more pshat, the more simple levels of the Torah, whether it's the Torah itself, the verses of the Torah portions, and you're familiar with them, and you're familiar with the basic commentary of them, and then you've studied some Mishnah, some Jewish law, some Talmud, and you're very grounded. You're grounded in Jewish wisdom. Once you have that in your pocket, then you can start to delve into the esoteric, the mysterious wisdom of Jewish mysticism. There's a very famous analogy brought about a king. The king once threw a very big, lavish feast for all of his subjects. Now, when they all came in, they saw what was there. There was tables and tables of food. So there were the breads and the appetizers and the main courses, the fish, the chickens, the meats. There was any kind of food you wanted was there in abundant amounts. And then there was the dazzling, delicious-looking dessert table. You know, when we go to weddings and my kids see the dessert table, So forget about the kids. What about adults? When you walk into the simcha, the bar mitzvah, the wedding, where's the first place you stop? So some people take their plate and they run straight to the dessert table. And they start to grab all the desserts that they can. They look so tempting. And you start to eat them. Now you came to this feast hungry. You hadn't eaten in a long time. You're supposed to eat dinner. But you started off with all the desserts. What happens? All that sugar doesn't satiate your hunger. And so even after you've finished all those desserts, you're still hungry because you haven't eaten any real food. But because of all that sugar, you're feeling nauseous. You're feeling sick. And so in this metaphor, this person who's hungry because he's eating so many desserts, but he hasn't eaten real food, but now he's hungry for real food, but he's feeling so sick, and now he goes out to the bathroom and he vomits it all out, and he gets so sick, but by the time he's done, all the food is finished, and he goes home sick and hungry, even though he could have enjoyed a delicious meal. Whereas a wise person knows, let's stop off with a piece of bread, let's get the appetizer, let's get some main course, let me fill myself with healthy, nutritious, real food, and then when I'm feeling like I've eaten enough, now I can go and enjoy and appreciate some of the delights of the dessert table. That's the metaphor, that's the analogy. Sometimes you have people, when they're entering into the realm of studying Torah and experiencing and discovering Judaism, they run for the esoteric. They want to know about deep, spiritual, mystical wisdoms and secrets, and peering into the depths of what the eye cannot behold and the mind cannot even fathom. And you ask them, tell me, do you know this week's Torah portion? Have you ever studied the Torah before? Do you know the story of the Jews in Egypt? The story of the Exodus? Do you know about this famous question and the commentary of Rashi? Do you know, have you studied basic Jewish law? Do you know the laws of Shabbat, the laws of kosher, the laws of Ahavat Yisrael, the laws of caring for other people, visiting the sick? Do you know any of Talmud? Can you even read Hebrew? I'm not saying this in a derogatory way. I'm saying that there's a system. And the Kabbalah, the spiritual, mystical delights are like the dessert. You cannot eat the dessert before you've eaten the main meal. And when you do, it could be very harmful. Just like in the metaphor, it was physically harmful. You got sick from all those desserts. It could be spiritually harmful, mentally, emotionally harmful, if you expose yourself to ideas, to secrets you're not ready for because you haven't received the grounding of the basic elements of Jewish wisdom and knowledge and tradition. Now, here, that's not so much the problem over here. Here we're dealing with 4 rabbis who were great sages, great scholars. They knew the whole Torah, they knew all of Talmud, they knew all of Jewish law, they knew it all. But they were still trying to discover and see and learn about things that the mind cannot fathom. There's a reason why God did not disclose these things to us. There is a reason why they're secrets. There's a reason why they're behind the curtain, because they're not for us to see. There's a very famous verse in the Torah. There's actually a drama, a conversation in the Torah. Moses, after the sin of the golden calf, and God wants to destroy the Jewish people, but finally God forgives them because Moses begs him, and then Moses has a request from God. Moses turns to God and he says, God, do me one favor. Har'eni na et kvodecha. Please, show me your face. Show me your glory. I want to see you, God. What does God answer? Ki lo yirani ha'adam v'chai. Nobody can see me and live. If you want to see me, you're going to have to die. You're going to have to expire. You cannot live in this world as a human being with your human functions, your minds and your hearts, and fathom me. It's either you or me, meaning you can't be disclosed into that very deep, essential realm of God. God does show him a part of him, the back of him, as you may know. The Medrash says he showed him his tefillin, the knot of a tefillin. Moses is he pushes him into the cleft of the rock, and God passes by, so he can see the back of God, but not the front of God, not the face, not the essence of God. Nobody can see the essence of God. It's a bit like, give an analogy. There's things we don't disclose to young children. Not because they're bad, not because they're wrong, but because it's too much for them. You're not going to take your 4-year-old and start to show him a Holocaust movie. You're not going to take your 4-year-old and start to teach him about how father and mother created him. It's not a bad thing. It's a beautiful thing. Well, the Holocaust is not a beautiful thing, but it's an important thing. And at some point in his life, when you're ready, you should learn about these things. You must know about these things. But not yet, not now. You're not ready for it. You don't have the kelim, you don't have the tools. This is what we call trauma. What's trauma? Trauma is when you become exposed to something that you don't know how to handle. You don't know how to process, right? People who live with traumas, everyone has a little bit of trauma because of different experiences in life, but some people have really debilitating traumas that affect them deeply every day or throughout their lives. And what's happened is that there's been experiences in their past, possibly very harmful, painful experiences, that at the time that they happened, or whenever they happen, we cannot fathom, we cannot process it. Right? When we go to sleep at nighttime, this is what psychologists teach. When we go to sleep at nighttime, what do our minds do? Yeah, when we're sleeping, I mean, we have some dreams, but how do our minds keep busy at nighttime? Nighttime is a very beautiful function of the brain. The brain is busy processing everything that we heard and we saw, we were exposed to when we studied and we learned throughout the day. So throughout the day, we are exposed to millions of things. I mean, most of which we're not even processing at the time. What we're seeing, what we're hearing, what we're learning. And there's a lot of pieces that are being captured in all kinds of neural pathways in our brain. And at nighttime, when there's a lot of calm and quiet, the brain is busy weaving all this information into different pathways and connections and trying to make sense of it and file it away, and everything should be organized in the brain's database, in the brain's hard drive, and everything has their place. It's a piece of information, it's got its label, it's got its tag, it's got its file name, it's a memory, it's an experience, it's a piece of knowledge, it's filed away, it's there, if you need it, you can get it back. But what happens, sometimes the brain encounters information, visions, experiences that it does not know how to process it. It doesn't have a name for it, doesn't have a label for it, doesn't fit into a file. It, in computer terminology, the coding is wrong, we cannot save it. The data is there, but you can't save it, you can't create a neurological pathway for it, you can't find a place for it in the brain. What happens to that? That is unresolved, unprocessed information. You know what that's called? In one word, it's called trauma. Trauma is what you cannot handle. And it affects you because it lingers there throughout your life. Unless you can ever work through therapy or other kinds of ways to process it and to give it a place. It shouldn't cloud your whole mind. It shouldn't hover and linger and distract you. It should have a place in your mind where maybe it's not comfortable, maybe it's not pretty, but at least you found a place for it. It shouldn't shake you up and torment you for the rest of your life. So we don't expose certain things to our children. So think about this. We physical, mortal human beings in this world, there are things that we cannot know. Simply because if we found them out, it'd be too much for us. Now in our country, in America, so many questions, and it's a chaotic time, and nobody really knows what's going on, and no one knows who's right and who's wrong, and who to believe and who not to believe, and all the talk, the conspiracy theories, and the talk about the huge amounts of corruption, criminal activity going on at the highest of levels, which has probably always been true. It's not something new for now, but we don't disclose this. And maybe for good reason. Maybe the country would go into chaos. People could not handle it if we found out such hypocrisy or such corruption going on certain levels. It's good not to know certain things, because if we find them out, they could completely tear us apart. They could ruin a society. You could demoralize a person. So the same thing is in a spiritual way. There are things, there are truths from God's perspective that humans never find out about it. We cannot understand it. And if you try to, you're going to get injured, you're going to get harmed. Because from your perspective down here, it's not something you can know, not something you can process and live that way. You don't have the tools to be able to understand all of those things. With that introduction, we can now get into understanding what happened in this story. We have 4 people, 3 of them got injured, and 1 came out peaceful. Ben Azai died. What was Ben Azai looking for? The commentaries tell us Ben Azai had a similar request like Moses' request. Moses said, God, show me your glory, show me your essence. Ben Azai wanted to see the essence of God, the essence of reality, the truth of all things. Chas v'shalom, somebody gets sick. So you ask why? Why did my loved one deserve to be sick like this, to suffer, to be in pain? Why did my loved one die? Chas v'shalom. In a way, that was Moses' question. According to some commentaries, that was Moses' question to God. I want to know, why do some of the wicked people prosper and succeed in life, and some of the most righteous people suffer? Moses asked God, according to one commentary, what is the reason for the righteous suffering? He wanted to know the truth. Now, God tells him, I can't tell it to you. It's not for you to know. Or maybe you can't know. Or maybe you don't want to know. Sometimes the truth hurts. You can't handle the truth, as they say. I recently heard, it was being shared a lot. Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs, who passed away a few weeks ago, about a month or two before he passed away, he did an interview with a lady from Brooklyn, from Crown Heights. And she asked him a whole lot of questions, and she asked him one question. She said, Rabbi Sachs, many years ago, you were with my parents, and my mother asked you, do you know why the righteous suffer? Why do bad things happen to good people? And at that time, was many years ago, Rabbi Sachs said, I don't know why. Can't answer. Many years later, he met that couple again. And again, that lady, the woman, asked him, since we last met, have you figured out why the answer to my question? He said, no. Or he told the husband, tell your wife, I still don't know the answer. But in this interview, which was literally a couple months before he passed away, the daughter asked Rabbi Sachs, maybe by now you have some kind of insight. Why do the righteous suffer? If you look at the video, Rabbi Sachs got very serious. And he said, yes, I have an answer. And the answer is that we don't know why the righteous suffer. And we're not meant to know. And it's a good thing that we don't know. It's a good thing that we're not told the reason by God. Because if we were told the reason by God of why a righteous person is suffering, then we would accept it. We would realize it's okay. And that's the worst thing, to accept that somebody's suffering. It's meant to be. God doesn't want that from us. God wants us to fight, to argue, to reject, to scream out to God with prayer and with cries, God, this is not okay. It's an injustice. You have to make this person better. And to do all in our power to beseech God to bring salvation and healing to this person. That's what God truly wants. He doesn't want you to say, when somebody's suffering, yeah, I know the reason it's meant to be. That's not for us. If you live up there, from God's perspective, he knows what he's doing, it's meant to be. But from our perspective, it's never meant to be. We have to demand. If there's an injustice, it should be repaired, it should be fixed. So we're not supposed to know everything in this world. But Azai wanted to know why the righteous suffer. And Ben Azai glimpsed almost into an answer, it looks like. He saw a vision of truth. He glimpsed at the divine presence. And there was something he was exposed to that was beyond his faculties, beyond his capabilities of fathoming, of comprehending, at least as a physical mind and a physical body. And to the moment that he saw it and he became sort of attracted to it or connected to it, and he wanted to, become one with this idea, become an angelic being, no longer be the human being down here, well, the soul left his body. And he expired and he passed away. We often learn about like Moses and his brother Aaron and other people that died through a method called Misat Nishika, the kiss of death. Right? Aaron passed away that way and Moses prayed to God, I also want to pass away that way. What's the kiss of death? Kiss of death is when God overwhelmed Aaron and Moses and others with a truth, with a reality that surpasses their human abilities to understand and appreciate. And if you're being exposed to and drawn into that awesome, powerful light, you lose your identity. You become consumed in that light and you just leave that world. So in those cases of Moses and Aaron, it was intentional. It's what God wanted. But over here, Ben Azai, he went to heaven and he never came back. Next, Ben Zoma. I want to get to Rabbi Akiva. Ben Zoma, it says, he also glimpsed of the divine presence. Ben Zoma was looking at something else, in fact. Rashi, in a few pages' time, says, Ben Zoma was trying to seek Maseh Bereshit. He was trying to understand the depths of the profundity and the secrets of creation. We learn about creation in the first few chapters of Genesis, but we're not told too much. We're just told things were created. How does creation happen? Who created them? What is the process of coming from nothingness into somethingness? How does an infinite spiritual God evolve into a finite physical reality and world? What causes everything to happen in ways that we appreciate and ways that we don't appreciate? Why do animals attack other animals? Why do some human beings behave a certain way or live in a certain way? Why is it? And I'll give you a true story. A few weeks ago, I was at a funeral. I officiated a funeral of a person, 38-year-old boy. Nebuch, he suffered through life, and he went through so many addictions and so many difficulties and challenges, and he was just starting to heal a little bit, and then another overdose, and he died from it. Why? These are big questions. Ben Zoma wanted to understand that the spiritual machinations are working behind all of creation, which is something that we're not supposed to. Imagine you like a computer game. So you love playing the game. It's fun. This person, that person, press this button, you can shoot, you can run, you can jump, you can hop, you can climb. Beautiful. Then if you learn some computer coding, imagine you learn how to access the back end of the game. And you want to see what's really going on in this game. Why can this person jump and run and shoot? And you go to the back end, and what do you see? You see something. You see numbers, you see binary code, you see all kinds of computer coding. If once you've been exposed to that, if you come back to this game, you'll never see the game the same way. You won't see a person that with the press of a button can wave its sword and can slash this person and can jump over this wall and run and roll. You don't see any of that anymore. You're seeing numbers, you're seeing binary code, you're seeing all kinds of computer language. You've ruined the whole game for yourself. You really have ruined the whole game. Once Ben Zoma glimpsed into the back end of creation, he ruined life for himself. He no longer could fathom, could appreciate life as we know it. He went meshuggah, he went crazy, he became mentally unstable because he was exposed to something that once you go there, you never come back. You can't live one human being into another human being and enjoy the power of love and enjoy the power of relationships and enjoy the power of study and the power of doubt and the power of question and the power of the experience of none of these things are as we should be appreciating them. So Ben Zoma goes meshuggah. Then we have Acher, who was Elisha ben Avuya. He became an outcast. He became an apostate. The expression of the Talmud is he chopped down the trees, right? If this is an orchard, as we started off, the spiritual orchard, so the metaphor is he chopped down all those trees. What does it mean to chop down these trees? He completely harmed and disconnected all of his spiritual senses. He left the Jewish faith, the monotheistic faith of one God. He actually adopted a spiritual faith of dualism, of two gods. At that time, there was a very popular Zoroastrian belief and other religions also that believed in two gods. There was the god of Hormuz, the god of Ohurmin, the god of evil, the god of goodness, the god of dark, the god of light. He understood there was more than one God. And so his whole education and his whole reality was completely shooken up. Why did that happen? So the Talmud tells us, when he went into heaven, he saw an angel, Matatrun, was sitting down and was writing about judgments of people and the reward and punishment and how they should be treated. And he had two big questions. Question number one is, we know that nobody in heaven is allowed to sit. God sits. It's God's domain. Anyone else, any angel in the presence of God always stands. How could there be somebody sitting in God's presence? Does that imply that there's somebody as powerful, unequal to God? So there's another God who can sit in God's presence? And number two, since when is reward and punishment decided by just an angel? I thought it was decided by God. You mean God is not involved? just in figuring out and in planning out the orchestrating our life. It's just relegated to some random angel to do what he wants. These confusions, these questions plagued Acher, and so he stopped believing in the whole thing. Now, there are many other versions of the story or other things that happened to him as well that created a lot of doubts, and we're going to discuss them in another class when we talk about Acher. But Acher became an apostate. In fact, there's another version in the Midrash that says that what happened when Acher came back as an apostate, at the hour that he entered the synagogue and the house of study, he saw children studying Torah. He would pronounce spells over them which would stop them. He was trying to stop and prevent any Torah study using any kind of power, even spells as well. That's Acher. Very sad. But that can happen when we're exposing ourselves to things that we're not trained, we're not accustomed to, we don't fully understand. Now we're going to get to Rabbi Akiva. By understanding how Rabbi Akiva succeeded in this journey, we'll know about the pitfalls, the potential pitfalls and dangers of this journey, and how did Rabbi Akiva succeed. Rabbi Akiva entered in peace, and he left in peace. What was his secret? What did he know or do that no one else could do? So I want to share with you 3 explanations, briefly, because it's getting a little late. We could talk about this for a long time. But 3 explanations, one more psychological, one a little more spiritual and mystical, and finally, one theological. And it goes like this. First of all, the psychological explanation over here. We have this problem. I say we. Yeah, we. That we think to every question there needs to be an answer. We need to have explanations behind them. We expect answers. If I can't get the answer today, I want to be able to get it tomorrow. But eventually I want to be able to arrive at the answer. When I have a question and there's no answer, for a lot of people that puts you in a very uncomfortable place. A place of a lot of doubt, a lot of confusion. How could there be no answer? Children in school are trained that there's answers to every question. They're doing math problems, history, science, whatever they're studying. They've learned the information. They get a test. Imagine on a test, you have a question and you write, the answer is, there's no answer. It's wrong. There's always an answer. That's what you're told in school. But that's not true in life. There's a lot of things in life we don't have answers for, because a lot of things that go on that are much beyond anything, not anything that we can understand, but anything that could be understood, as we said earlier. Schools need to maybe educate children more about this. I remember when I was in yeshiva, so a lot of times teachers gave us tests in Talmud, for example, and the tests were ones that every question has an answer. It's really asking from the text. What does it say? What's the argument? Factual questions that has factual answers. But there was one teacher we had who had love. When he asked questions, there was no necessarily real true answer to this question. It doesn't say it in the text. It's not a factual question. It was a question asking for a suggestion. What do you think this person may have said? Or what do you think they could be arguing about? Or how do you think this person could have resolved? There's no answer for this. You need to think. You need to come up with it. Maybe you have an answer. Maybe you don't have an answer. And I remember many times I would work hard and I'd put a lot of work and write a whole page just for an answer. And I was very proud of my answer. And very often when I got my test back, it was always 9 out of 10. Every question was worth 10. And I asked him, why 9? 1 point once, what did I do wrong? He said, listen, maybe your answer is a correct answer. It's just not the answer that I thought about. I thought about a different answer. So I'm giving you only 9. Point is, to be comfortable with understanding and knowing that we can't have answers to all questions. When a crisis hits and there's a tragedy, Rabbi, tell me, why did this happen? Why is my mother deserving of this kind of illness? Why was this person killed? Why? And it's insisting on an answer. And if you don't have an answer, then it's questioning my whole faith. Maybe this whole thing is not true. How could our tradition, how could our religion not have answers? There's a lot of answers we don't have. You need to be comfortable with that. You need to understand that. You need to understand why you can't understand always. I'll tell you a beautiful story. There was a great Torah scholar. His name was Rabbi Yosef Rosen, known as the Rogatchover Gaon. Lived before the war in the city of Rogatchov in Belarus. Now, he had the whole Torah on his fingertips. Very often people would ask questions to him. He didn't have the time or the patience to write out lengthy answers. Very often, if you got an answer, there's a piece of paper with like 3 or 4 different references. See this Talmud, see this Tosfos, see this page 55, see over there. And you have to go follow the sources, the references, study it, and then you can get your answer. One time, a person wrote a letter to the Rogatchover, and he said, Rebbe, I've been studying this passage of Talmud. I have all these questions. I haven't advanced for the last 3 weeks because I'm stuck on this question. I can't find any answer, and I haven't made any progress. I'm trying to figure out the answer over here. Please help me out. And he got a response from the Rogatchover with like 10 different reference source notes. See here, see there, see there, see there, see there. He has his homework cut out for him. And he begins to explore and visit all of those different references, and he studies them, and he studies all of them. And he can't find, none of them are answering his question. They're all talking about complete different topics. None of them are touching on the question that he asked. Eventually, he writes a letter back to the Rogatchover, and he says, I studied deeply all of the sources you gave me, and I can't find any answer to my question. So the Rogatchover answered, those sources do not answer your question. But if you look at all those sources, there are sources to commentaries, where the commentary asks a question, and concludes and says, Ein Yodea, I don't know. I don't have an answer. Or the Talmud might say, Teku, let the question stand. We don't have an answer. And yet you'll notice that further along down the page, the commentary continued. The Talmud continued. There's another page, another page. The lesson he was teaching him is, so you have a question. For that you stop studying for 3 weeks because you can't move further. You have a question and move on. Either you will or you won't get an answer. So questions are great also. Learn to enjoy a question. I always, when I drop off my kids to school, I always tell them, ask questions. I don't know. It doesn't bother me so much if they have the answers or not. Curiosity, questions. So Rabbi Akiva basically understood the path of peace is the path of being able to tell oneself, I don't need to have all the answers all the time. I don't have to always understand everything. I have to realize that some things cannot be understood, and I'm okay with that. And I can continue to live comfortably with faith and with peace in myself, even with questions. That's point number 1. That's super important. I'm going to only do point number 3. I'm going to miss point number 2 for now. We'll do it another time. Let's go back to the original caution of Rabbi Akiva. This is a theological point, and it's very, very powerful. Rabbi Akiva told them, as they were entering into heaven, be careful. When you see those blue stones, those sapphire stones, don't say water, water. Because it's a lie. There's no water in heaven. It just looks like water. Rabbi Akiva was laying down the groundwork over here for the trappings of what can become idolatry. How appearing into the mystical spiritual secrets of heaven, if you're not careful, could lead you to idolatry, a complete abuse of monotheistic Jewish faith. How so? First of all, you see the blue stones, it appears to you like water, and you become thirsty and I want water, water. It's a lie. It's not water, it's blue stones. There's this difference between what it is and what it appears to be. We can make a mistake very often of what is reality and what is just an appearance of reality, but it's not really true. The great Baal Femtov cautioned people when they're studying Kabbalah, or even when you're studying Torah, and the Torah talks about Vayomer Hashem, and God spoke, and Vayishma Hashem, God heard, and God's arm, outstretched arm, took the people out of Egypt. You think God has an arm? You think God has an ear? You think God has a mouth? God never uttered a word in his life, even though the Torah says God spoke to Moses millions of times. God doesn't speak, he doesn't hear, he doesn't have arms, he's not a physical person. And if heaven forbid, when you learn these verses as an adult, you're imagining the mouth, the ear, the hand, the body of God, that's an idolatrous belief. You think God has physical dimensions, has body, has organs, has shape and color and size. If you're imagining that way, your God is not a God. It's not the Jewish God. You're making a big mistake. The Jewish God is not this elderly person in heaven with a long white beard with 2 pitchforks in his hand. That's not the Jewish God. The Jewish God has no visibility. There's no image to God. And so when you're studying all these texts that are describing what appears to be the image of God and the body of God, be careful. This is metaphor. For example, and God spoke. God doesn't have a mouthpiece. But what is speech? By us, if I speak words to you, I'm communicating something to you. And something enters your ear and then enters your brain. And you can now know something by virtue of me verbally communicating it to you that you didn't know before. So somehow words or speech is a metaphor for delivering a piece of information to you that you now know something. Now, God can do that. God can deliver information to you in a way of communication. There's no speaking, there's no sound, there's no words, but it enters into your psyche by virtue of God's communication. When God speaks to Moses, Moses doesn't hear a voice. God doesn't have a voice. So the danger of not understanding metaphor, not understanding allegory, and the danger of constructing a God that is completely not true. And that's some of the pitfalls or the potential dangers of studying Kabbalah and all of these spiritual wisdoms that may be giving us a very false and therefore idolatrous understanding of what God is. Gary says, faith and trust in Hashem, that he knows what he's doing. Yes, thank you, Gary. So that's the first caution of Rabbi Akiva. When you go there, don't say water, because there's no water there. Don't start to interpret God and interpret spiritual realities based on your view of the universe, your view of the finite physical human being in this world, because you're going to have it all wrong. Be very, very careful. And there's lots more to say about that. But I want to go to one final point, and that is the water. Why does Rabbi Akiva say water twice? Be careful not to say water. Water once, why twice? The Arizal explains this as follows. Water. Where do we have the expression of the creation of 2 waters? There are 2 waters, in fact. If you go back to the beginning of creation, on the second day of creation, God splits the waters, and there's the upper waters in the heavens, in the firmament, and the lower waters down below. That was the first split, one of the first divisions in creation. Now, division is a very scary thing. Division seems to be the antithesis of God. God is oneness. God is unity. How can there be division? And division can lead us into thinking that there are different powers. Just like what Acher ended up believing, there are different gods. There's the God of the upper worlds, the God of the lower worlds, the God of history, but the God of nowadays. Different gods are competing with each other, different forces, and the world is one big complicated mix of different forces competing with each other. That is an idolatrous belief. On the second day of creation, when God made the split of water, the upper and the lower waters, the Torah does not say kitov. Doesn't say that the creation was good. On the first day, he created light and it was good. On the third day, he created vegetation and it was good. On the fourth day, he created the stars and the sun and the moon and it was good. Everything was good in creation. But when he split the waters, it doesn't say it was good. It wasn't good. It created a split, and a split is a potential to recognize 2 different deities, 2 different forces in the world, which can lead you down an idolatrous path. It's only on the third day when it was realized that the purpose of the upper waters and the lower waters is to be able to have a functioning universe here in this world, where there's earth and the seas down here, and the cycle of water which evaporates and becomes the clouds of the sky, and then it comes down. And we understood why God did it this way, so that humans could live on dry land, etc., etc. So we understood that the split in the waters wasn't to create this dichotomy, this split of reality, but was rather to create a much more comprehensive reality, a peaceful reality that works in a wonderful way. On the third day, when we discovered the purpose and the unifying force behind these split, then it says, Kitov, it was good. And it happened on the third day. Day number 2, right? This is the nature of peace, and the nature of unity. When you have one of something, you have unity. You don't really have unity. You just have oneness. But you have no, it's not, the oneness hasn't been challenged by anything else. It's just one. When you have two, now you have a challenge. Now you have a separate thing that's other than the one. It could be something that will challenge the first one. There could be competition over here. Peace is factor number 3. Peace is when the two separate elements can discover that which is common within, or that which transcends them both and can unite these two into one. Now you have a state of peace, right? Think about when a person who's never been married before and says, I'm a peaceful person, I've never disagreed with my spouse, I've never had a fight. Yeah, well, you live on your own, you got nobody to fight with, right? It's not a challenge. Then you marry a spouse, you move in with somebody. Now there's two in the home. Now there could be an argument. Now there could be a disagreement. This could be a recipe for disaster. This could be a home that everything is argued about and fought over. So entering a relationship with someone else is a risky thing, meaning if you want to live a life of peace, when you're on your own, you can always have peace, but inviting someone else could create disaster. But real love, real peace, real harmony is when you bring someone else into your life and yet you learn how to get along. You learn how to trust and respect each other. That's a real peace. That's real shalom bayit. Shalom bayit is when two people in the home, not one person in the home. That was the power of day number 3. That's what Rabbi Akiva was telling them. Be careful about the mayim. When you go up to heaven, you're going to see all kinds of things which you don't understand. All kinds of things which are going to create a lot of questions. Things which will tempt you to think that there's a mayim and there's a mayim. There are different forces. Acher saw Matat's room, the angel. He was sitting there. He was writing things. You have a voice over here. That means there's 2 different gods over here. The more we expose ourselves to spiritual life and realities and all kinds of mystical secrets, the more we may be able, we may not understand what's going on and may be led to believe, but there are different forces that are challenging the oneness of God. Be very careful, says Rabbi Akiva, that's idolatrous. Remember that there's only oneness. And no matter how confusing it sometimes appears, how could this happen? How could that happen in God's one unified world? How could God allow it to happen? I don't know. I'm not God. If I pretended to know, I'm basically saying that I am God, but I'm not. I'm a creation of God. I live on this side of the curtain, not on that side of the curtain. And I'm not supposed to be on that side of the curtain. And actually, I don't belong there. I belong here. And within my capacities, what God has shown me in my life, I need to live in a faithful way as much as possible. That was Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva understood questions are okay. Doubt is never okay. You can question, but you can't doubt. Rabbi Akiva understood it's important to explore Kabbalah. It's important to get into the secrets of life. But make sure you're very well grounded in your faith, very well grounded in your knowledge of Jewish learning and Jewish tradition. Make sure you're being trained by somebody who knows what they're doing. You're not on your own, because if you're on your own, who knows where you can get to. That's actually what the Hasidic teachings did and contributed. Because if you ever tried to access Kabbalah, tried to study a Zohar, study a piece of the Arizal or other Kabbalistic texts, they're very difficult sometimes. They're difficult, just the very subject matter and the language and the terminology and the layers, and it's hard to follow. But also conceptually, to be able to understand it as a Godhead, as God ideas, can be very foreign to us. We may not be able to anthropomorphize the ideas properly and be led down a false path. Hasidic teachings distilled the important themes of Kabbalah in a way that can actually sit inside your mind, in your heart, to enhance and to boost your relationship with Torah and with God, that you should live more purposefully, with greater faith, with greater happiness, with greater clarity. So, in conclusion, my friends, we went over time tonight, but this is a very dense topic. We have here the story of 4 rabbis who walked into heaven. One of them did not come out. One of them came out crazy. One of them came out an apostate. And only Rabbi Akiva went in peace and came out with peace. Rabbi Akiva understood how to be careful. He understood to see everything in a state of oneness, not to ever be distracted by things that sometimes can make you question or doubt. And tamim tihiyeh, live with God with simplicity. Believe, have faith. We're not God. We're here down here. We'll do the best we can. We'll pray. We'll make sure that we'll try our best that evil should never happen, suffering should never happen. But we live as we can and we're supposed to in this world. Enough said for now. So much more to speak about. Thank you for joining us here tonight, my friends. God bless you all. Meet you same time, same place next week. Stay safe. Have a good evening.